Cool. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Hi, everybody. Hope you guys are all doing good. Welcome to Alumni Reunion Week 2021. We're really excited. The Alumni Association is really excited to be able to offer not only this, but a lot of really awesome sessions. We'll be sure to plug those throughout the course of the day. But really today, we're here to talk about athletics. We're here to talk about sports, everything that you guys love, UD athletics, everything with that. So before we get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Ryan Phillips. I'm the Marketing and Digital Strategy Coordinator. That's a long title and a lot to say that I do a lot of little things here and there and help out. One of the main things that you guys probably know that I have my hand in a lot is all of our social media, all of our digital, things along those lines. That's really a lot of where you're going to see things that I'm doing, whether it's the men's basketball Twitter account or Instagram, different things along those lines. That's really where I spend a lot of time, efforts, things like that. I could go on and on all day talking about that, but I know that you guys don't want to hear me talk about my job. You're here to listen to our awesome athletic director, Neil. And before I introduce him, I actually want to tell you guys a quick little story about Neil, just to give you an idea of who he is as a person. I'm actually a UD grad. So I graduated in 2016. With a sport management degree. And when I was a junior, I was sitting there and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was going back and forth with a bunch of different things. And I found myself sitting in Neil's office when he was deputy athletic director at the time. And I was like, Neil, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm absolutely lost. And Neil spent probably about 45 minutes to an hour with me telling me, hey, here's a couple of different paths. Here's things that I think you would be good at. Let's talk through some of this stuff. And if it wasn't for that conversation, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys today, working in college athletics, loving what I'm doing, and continuing to eventually want to be an athletic director one day. And I can contribute all of that. It goes back to that conversation with Neil. And so I think that that's just, I can guarantee you he's probably had hundreds of those conversations. And anybody that talks to you about Neil will say that he's somebody that, whether you know him in person or you've talked to him at different times, he is the same guy and he's absolutely incredible. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. Neil, how are you doing today?
We're doing good. And thanks for that introduction, Ryan. And I think sometimes it's good for people to see the man behind the mystery of a lot of the social media accounts. So that we've done really well with that lately. And people always ask me who that is. So it's good to put a face to it for everybody. It's the man behind the words.
Oh yeah. So hopefully now people know when they're sitting there going, well, why aren't you doing this or why are you doing that? You're texting or you're sending messages to me. So I'm the person that sees it all on the other end. So we'll go ahead and get started. Neil, I think that the first thing we want to talk about is this past year and everything that went into this past year. It was a lot. I think that you can attest to it. Everybody can attest that it was a whole lot of everything. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview update on really the state of college athletics and the state of the University of Dayton athletic department and how we're responding post-COVID or as we go into the back end of COVID?
Yeah, I think everything that we all dealt with as a country, as an institution, has been well documented. So I'll try not to go back through all that. I think that the challenge that everyone was faced with was trying to balance competitiveness and in winning, which is what we all expect, with health and wellness of the young people that we serve and those of our fans. And it's a very tough balance to strike at times. An example I give is our women's basketball team from I think October 15th through March, where they were in quarantine for 47 days as a team. And so when you think about how we're trying to manage them in quarantine, but also ask them to hopefully deliver championships for us, you're constantly in this space of how much competitiveness and how much winning and how much fans, and trying to find the right mix of those things in order to that to happen. So we've ended this year, I feel successfully within our programs. We fell short in both men's and women's basketball, the NCAA tournament, which is a stated goal of ours. No matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the seas look like, we expect to land that ship. And we weren't able to land that ship this year for a number of reasons. But in the rest of our sports, all of our sports participated in some form of postseason play. Our teams had successful experiences other than the challenge that we had with football. We did not play a football season this year for a variety of reasons, most around health and safety. But we're about ready. We have one athlete that's competing this week in the NCAA track and field championship in the javelin. And so Casey's out in Oregon right now doing that. And then that will put a bow on the 2021 season. And then we've just shifted our focus to try to get back to some level of normalcy and finding that right balance between, fans, our finances, our competitiveness, health and safety. So hopefully it starts to get on the rear view side of what we've been working on. But that was kind of the challenge of trying to strike the balance. Playing during a pandemic, there is no manual for, and it was very, very challenging in all our sports, especially in basketball. But we're hopefully beginning to look forward.
Yeah, I think that that's something that I know that we've stressed a lot, and I know that you talk about a lot, is that we want to start looking forward and moving forward. And so I'm going to ask you one more question about COVID, and then we are going to move forward. And we're going to try talking about some new stuff. What was one or two things that really impressed you about our student athletes this past year? I mean, this year was full of so much stuff. What was it about our student athletes, or were there any specific instances that you were just like, this is absolutely incredible and showcase the caliber of people that we have as our student athletes?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot, but I think I'd use the word their resiliency and their togetherness and their toughness. So it's very hard to deliver news to young people whose identity is attached to their sport that they can't play, or have to go to isolation. Like I said, we've had some athletes that have been in quarantine or isolation for more than 40 days during their 2 semesters here. And not to say it was easy, but everyone did what we asked them to do to give them the best chance to have some success as a team. And there was a lot of sacrifices that people had to make. If you think about our basketball teams that played really during the peak of the pandemic, some of them had not seen their family since they came to campus a year ago, last July. And we asked them after games not to interact with their family, not to go out to dinner. They made sacrifices with their friends. They made sacrifices with their testing. They made all those things so that they could have an opportunity to be successful, and frankly, an opportunity to represent the university. And for us, I mean, our fans wanted them to play. And, I didn't want to put them in a situation where they felt, they were doing something that just for our entertainment, if you will. But they were exceptionally resilient. They were nimble. They were agile. They did everything that was asked of them to give them the best opportunity at success. And, it sounds, there's a lot of people, and I don't want to liken, playing college sports to some of the tragedy that people had with, people passing away from COVID and loved ones and very serious illness. And we've had that in athletics. But as a young person, it's quite intimidating every day to come down and get tested. And you get tested and you're just waiting for those results. Can I practice today? Can I play today? It's the game. We probably had 30 or 40 basketball games scheduled or canceled, but between that. So for them to do that every day and go to school and perform on national television and perform wearing the University Dayton uniform, I'm just very proud of them. I let them know how proud I was. They grew up. They had to grow up quick. And between 18, that's a lot to ask of an 18 to 22-year-old. We have paid adults and employees that, have struggled during COVID, just with the psychological aspect of it, the isolation of it, the lack of social norms that are normal. And then you throw that on an 18 to 22-year-old that's expected to perform at an elite level. That is not an easy task. And so I'm just very thankful for them and very proud of the way that they conducted themselves. So that's what stands out the most to me.
That's absolutely incredible. So we're going to shift gears now. We're going to start looking towards the future. Before we get to that, just a real quick reminder for everybody. If you want to submit a question, you can. Definitely submit your questions. We're going to chalk out a lot of time to answer those questions that you have for Neil. So if you have a question, throw it in the chat and hopefully we'll be able to get to it and get it answered. But as we start to say, we're looking forward now. Fall sports season. What do you think as of right now on Monday at 12:10 p.m., what is it going to look like?
Yeah, Ryan's probably got a lot of emails for me because I would start every email this year with, as of this email at this time, this is what we believe to be accurate. But as I sit here today, we are planning for pre-pandemic competition, pre-pandemic operations. So if you think back to 1920, we are preparing schedules. We are preparing our team returns in August. Our basketball teams are both here. All freshman basketball players are here, minus one on the men's side that's finishing up where he is. So they're actually had their first official team workout today, I believe, at 8 a.m. in the weight room. So we are moving forward with a glass half full approach, and we think that's the best way to do that. Clearly, we understand that the vaccination rates continue to have to improve both on campus and in the community. We understand that we are certainly in the mass gathering business, if you will, of travel, team meals, togetherness, and it requires the breakdown of social distancing. So I think we're prepared to pivot, and so we're prepared to be able to adapt, and I think we're ready to adapt. But we are moving forward as if we will have a traditional season with a couple caveats. We took a pretty significant financial hit last year, clearly with no fans. The year before that, we lost the NCAA tournament run. We have had some very significant challenges in the costs of managing COVID, whether that's through testing stuff. So in some of our sports, we're going to ease back into it. I tell some people in sports outside of basketball, it might be a multi-year exit financially from COVID. I will say, and I don't say this because we have alums on here, we would not be in the position that we are if it weren't for our fans and the support that they provide athletics. We did have our arena seating plan last year was charged in full and paid in full by 99% of our season ticket holders, when most of them never came to a game or opted out. And that has been the fuel that has sustained us over this past year. And quite simply, without that, we would not have been able to compete this year at any level that we did. And moving forward, it gives us a platform to be successful. So I do want to make sure I thank anyone on this call that was part of that. It truly was a game changer for people to continue their support during the pandemic versus just take that year off. Would have been very, very challenging and made a difficult situation almost impossible. But we are moving forward as best we can based on what we know that as we call it in athletics, full go. And we hope to be full go come August 1st.
That's awesome. I think that's something that it's so refreshing to hear that and all. And so we'll allow, if anybody has any questions about that, again, plug in the chat box, please submit your questions. We'll be happy to take them. I want to shift gears a little bit, Neil, and this is something that I know that we hear all the time, is that you talk about the lifeblood of college athletics being recruiting. And I think that right now you could argue to say that across the board, not just men's basketball, but across the board, we're recruiting at an elite level or at much higher level than we have in the past. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into it, and specifically men's basketball and women's basketball, but then branching out a little bit in terms of what that process looks like, how it's been, and how you think that we're stacking compared to others and everything in the world of recruiting right now?
Sure, it's a good question, and there's never any one perfect silver bullet in recruiting. I think that's the additive cumulative effect of a lot of things. But in college, that really starts and stops with your coaches. It starts with your coaches, and that is the most important aspect of it. We'd all like to think that all athletes are choosing a school based on exactly what that school is, and they say, look, I just want to go to the University of Dayton no matter who the coach is, no matter who my teammates are. There are some young men and women that want to come to the University of Dayton for that reason, but the vast majority of them come to play for a program, a style, a fit, a coach that they think can help them become the best version of themselves and give them the opportunity to be successful young men and women in their craft. So we start and stop with the coach, people like Shauna Green and Anthony Grant and their assistant coaches as well, and along down the line through all our head coaches. I think the second thing is the institution, the University of Dayton. We're not for everybody. We are selective in the type of young man or woman that can be successful here, and that combines really three things, which is their athletic success, their academic success. We believe in meaningful education, meaningful graduation. And then, socially, and we all throw the word community out a lot, but ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a community, and you have to embrace community to be successful at the University of Dayton socially. So, I think those things, and then I think the third piece that you're very involved with, we made a conscious, deliberate effort about 3 years ago to really continue to manage, our brand. And brand is often, I think, an overused term, and it's hard to define of what that means and things, but really, we want to influence people about what they think and feel about the University of Dayton. We want to influence what they think before they've met us. We want them to have a feel for what we're about. And we do that in recruiting, through social media, through emails, through graphics, et cetera. And we think we've really elevated that, significantly in our time. And what we want to continue to do is elevate that to another level, where this whole year we recruited at the highest level we recruited, and kids could not visit campus. And that was through technology. That was through people like yourself and others that made the University of Dayton go out into into the homes of people in order to convince them to come here. So coaching, the institution, and then the continued elevation of our brand is what our focus is.
You talked about a lot of really awesome things there. And I want to focus on one of those things, in particular at our highest level with men's and women's basketball. I think that over the last couple of weeks, people have seen we've had a little bit of turnover in both of those staffs, with men's basketball bringing on James Kane, women's basketball bringing on Olivia Applewhite. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like of when we're hiring a new assistant coach, sort of who's in the room, who's talking with them, and how do you guys come to those conclusions as to, you know what, this is the person we're going to bring in and we're going to entrust to help take us forward and take us to that next step?
Yeah. So when we deal with it's not too dissimilar. Obviously, head coaching searches are much more intense, much more public, and much more influential than necessarily than assistants. But what we've learned and what we believe is that, the weakest link, aspect of coaching staff, and the players spend as much time with their position coach or their assistant coach sometimes as they do their head coach, if not more, most of the time. So typically we talk about our assistant coaching staffs complementing the head coach and what the head coach's vision is, and they have to fit into that. So, just using football as an example, if Coach Chamberlain wanted to run the West Coast offense, it may not make the most sense to hire someone that spent their career running the option, the triple option or the wishbone, what have you. So we spent a lot of time kind of going through, what it is that head coach needs to be successful, because that's the most important person that they serve, or what the head coach does that. Both Shauna and Anthony have a strong network of coaches, across the country that they're familiar with, that they work with. And I wouldn't trade our assistant coaches, across the board in men's and women's basketball for much. And it doesn't, we look to compete at the highest level. And so we have to have a staff that reflects that. We can't just say that and then not do that. And so it was sad to lose Coach Sullivan. He was fantastic. He had an opportunity at Notre Dame where he has a long history, and that ended up being right for his family. And we supported him in that effort. But we're also able to have a lot of firepower, just fill right back in with James Kane. And Olivia Applewhite also played here for us, played for the Flyers, and she actually spent some time coaching within the A10. So it's great to have her back as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. We have one other aspect of that I wanted to talk about a little bit. You talked about brand, and I think that you sort of mentioned a little bit, this is something that people talk about all the time and everything else. And as name, image, and likeness starts to become this very overwhelming thing, and we'll talk about name, image, and likeness in a second. But really, when you think about the Dayton brand and all as of right now, what would you say, like, this is the Dayton brand, and how do you think it continues to elevate on that national level?
I mean, the number one thing that we, if we were summarizing that, is we want to dominate you, but we want to do it in a classy way. I mean, that what our brand wants to be is we want to win big, and we want to do it with class. And when we say with class, we want to do that with, taking serious the education of the young men and women that we serve. We're not here to bring people in that aren't interested in meaningful education, meaningful graduation. To do that, we want our young men and women to represent, the 100,000 alums that we have in a positive manner. So, win with class is kind of the what ultimately we're after, and do that in a dignified way, in a respectful way that everyone can be proud of. So there's a lot that goes into that, but that's the message ultimately that we want to portray. We don't want to be, University of Dayton's obviously very community oriented, very loving, very welcoming community, but we want to fight you. We want to fight you hard on the court and on the fields, and we want to be hyper competitive about that. And then we want to be able to also reflect the Catholic Marinist values of this institution at the same time. So sometimes that's not always the easiest balance to strike, but that's what our kind of our brand ideal is, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that leads us into this final sort of question I have to the initial part of it, I should say. And then we'll get into some of the questions that we've had coming in so far. So if you have a question, please be sure to submit it in the chat box. But name, image, and likeness, this is something that's dominating the news. It's dominating everything in the world of college athletics, and it's going to shift, and it's happening. It's going to happen. July 1 is this date that everybody's talked about. For those that maybe don't know as much about it, can you give a basic overview of what name, image, and likeness means, what it is, and how you think it's going to affect the University of Dayton?
Sure. So I think that the easiest way to describe it is student athletes, if they have the opportunity to monetize or to use their representation as an athlete and their representation as a person, to do things like sign autographs, have commercial endorsements, make speaking appearances, run their own camps and clinics. So for example, I typically use Obi as an example because it resonates with people. When Obi was here, the rules would not have permitted Obi to do the classic car dealer commercial, or maybe be a spokesman for Milano's, or there's trivia night at Milano's and Obi's going to read the quiz questions and Milano's wants to pay him to do that to attract more people to come. Obi could run his own camper clinic down at Centerville High School or what have you. That was all not allowed in amateur athletics from the NCAA perspective. So it can go a number of different directions. There are some very significant disruptive predictions that think that this will fundamentally alter college sports forever. When you think about maybe recruiting in the SEC and quarterbacks at Alabama, and how that all plans out, or if you picture Zion Williamson being recruited with the opportunity of fans and people with thousands and in some cases millions of dollars of endorsements or opportunities that they could do. And then on the other hand, there are people that it can be a great thing for your average soccer player or baseball player that can go to their hometown and run a camp or a clinic or make an appearance at a Rotary Club and get paid $500 to speak there about their time as a student athlete. So the range of opportunity ranges from, for some people, this isn't really a big deal, to the high end of the top 1 or 2% to be a really big deal. Our challenge is we range from maybe a football program that plays in the Pioneer Football League that is not comparable to Ohio State football and what doesn't have that level of publicity, to our basketball team. If we play Ohio State on a neutral court, we expect to win. And I want players on our team that would start for Ohio State. That's what we want. We don't shy away from that. That's not the case necessarily in some of our other sports, but in men's and women's basketball, I want our players to be able to start in the Big Ten. And so how that ends up manifesting itself in recruiting, how that manifests itself in the transfer market, in the ability to retain players and the ability to recruit against some of those brands will be seen. We'll be ready for it, but it's not an insignificant development, but it really is stratified across the different sports. And what it means for men's basketball is different than what it means for, say, women's golf. And there's a continuum in between. So it's a significant change. We do believe it's ultimately it's time for it to happen. There's some things that obviously concern me, but the courts have held consistently, and there's cases in the Supreme Court now, and there's different state laws that, regardless of what Neil Sullivan thinks or the University of Dayton thinks or the NCAA thinks, this is coming as a fundamental issue of student athlete rights that state legislatures and cases the Department of Justice has said is time to come. So we have no choice but to embrace it and try to capitalize on the power of the University of Dayton for our student athletes.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think on that note, we'll go ahead and shift, and we have a couple of questions coming in. So if you have a question, please submit it. We'll be happy to take it. First one, is there any update on the red and blue game this year? Is it happening? Yeah,
our working goal is to have one. It's been a long time since we've had that, because you had the arena transformation that really took the arena offline for 3 years. So really, if I think back, it's probably been the fall of 17, maybe the fall of 16, actually the fall of 16, I believe, since we've had a red-blue game. So, our goal, especially when COVID really allows and campus protocols associated, we need to get our players back reacclimated with our fans. We need that relationship. I mean, we have 10 players, I think, that, in fact, no player on our team will have played for more than 1 year of Dayton basketball. And that would be, in terms of, actually, no one has played more than 1 year, but we have 10, as the NCAA counts them, 10 freshmen or sophomores. So we're very young. We've got Malachi Smith, we got Lynn Greer, Kobe Elvis, a transfer from DePaul. And a lot of our fans sometimes feel like they don't even know our freshmen from last year, right? Kobe Brea and RJ Blakeney, and get to meet Elijah Weaver. So we really want to find ways that our players can get back in the community and have our fans be able to see and feel our men's and women's basketball players in all our sports, but obviously the visibility of basketball. So our working goal would be to have some type of fan event, whether that's merged with the red blue game or skills thing, but that is a working goal of ours.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to paraphrase on this next question a little bit, but one of the things I think that made UD Arena and makes UD events and UD athletic events so special is the atmosphere, whether it's Red Scare, the t-shirts, the pep band, mascots, cheerleaders, everything. Can you talk a little bit, do you think that those will be back, and where do you think that that plays a role in the University of Dayton athletics experience, that whole atmosphere that's provided?
Well, I certainly hope they'll be back, and we're hopeful that they will. I think from a student athlete perspective, people want to know that what they do has value to others, and that what they do is important. And I think by fans being present at everything from a basketball game to a baseball game to a golf match, we had a freshman golfer that qualified for the first NCAA championship in golf. And a few of us went over there to watch him as a freshman. He won the A10 championship as a freshman. He was an overall leader. He for the you golfers on the call, he finished birdie eagle to win. And the young man, a freshman, Henry May. And people say, well, why are you going to drive out there? It's because he needs to feel that it's important. It's important to us, and by sometimes being present shows value. So that's why we believe in fans. The second thing is just a competitive, that's real, to have energy. And there's many times that, I would contend there's games for sure we would have won at UD Arena this year with our fans, when you're, up against the stretch against, SMU at the buzzer, or a couple of other games that we fell short on. So it matters a lot. And it's, I would say, it is not any one thing, but it's the cumulative, additive effect of everything we do, from the video boards to the fans, to the band, to Willie, to cheerleaders, to corporate giveaways. It all adds to the atmosphere and adds value to what our players do, and I think gives them some energy and effort. And all we had to do was look at this past year to see how much fans matter in sports. And I'll be the first to say I was at every basketball game this year. I missed a couple of away games due to COVID and travel, but it's not that enjoyable of an experience. We did a great job. I think we did the best we could do with, we had to have no more than 300 fans, but not very enjoyable. And it wasn't enjoyable for our players. So we're hopeful that changes, but our fans and the environment is an absolutely critical part of what we do.
Yeah, I can attest to that and second that too. It absolutely stunk at points. It was just, we need the fans back. And so that's huge. Neil, I think I can answer this next one, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Did you binge any shows during quarantine? Follow up, do you know what Netflix is?
No, I did not. No, I did not binge any shows, or I do not know how to log into Netflix, but my kids have it. But no, I did not binge watch. I did not binge watch, but that's a good question.
That's awesome. Next question. I know this is a fan favorite question. Do you see UD leaving the A10 conference anytime soon?
I do not. I think, we're, like any athletic director in the country is constantly trying to make sure that we're dialed into what's happening in our conference and around us. And certainly we do that. And President Spina and I are active and engaged in that. But, as of, June 7th here, we think that, I think there's no imminent changes on that. And we're focused on trying to make the A10 the best conference that it can be.
Perfect. Similar-ish question. As you're looking right now, this actually isn't similar at all. I don't even know why I said that. As you're looking right now, is the ESPN tournament, the Thanksgiving tournament, the Worldwide of Sports, still a go as of June 7th at 12:30 p.m.?
Yes. So, the field has been announced, and that is planned to be a go. They plan to have fans. We're excited. It's a very good field. I think our fans will go there in droves. It's Thursday, Friday, Sunday. So Saturday is off. So the games start on Thanksgiving Day. We play Friday and Saturday's an off day, but we were last there in 2015 and just really took over the place. And I think we played Iowa, Xavier, and the other game is slipping me. Maybe it was Monmouth. Yeah, and so we're excited. We're excited to get, that could be, an opportunity for families to get together. I mean, obviously we'll have a couple games before that at the arena, but a lot of our families use that as their holiday vacation, and they gather, and they got aunts and uncles and alums and stuff. So we're excited to be part of that. But as of this Zoom call, it plans to be on.
Can you give a little update or inside look at our volleyball team and how you think our volleyball team is going to do this year? And I mean, for those of you that didn't know, they made it to the NCAA tournament this past spring, and they performed absolutely incredibly. And so they're getting ready to build off of that. But Neil, can you give an update on how they're looking for the fall and how you think they're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, volleyball is a perennial NCAA caliber team, and so obviously we lose an incredible setter, an incredible setter, Bridget Doherty, to do that. But we have a lot of firepower coming back, a lot of firepower coming in. That I was actually out in Omaha, I believe it was Omaha, when, as you said, when we took Washington to 5 games, and just literally a matter of inches. I mean, just inches of side out and side in. So I think Coach Horsman believes he's going to be pretty good. I mean, they're looking forward to having a more normal schedule. Their schedule was really had no non-conference games last year, essentially. I mean, they did, but not at the level that we focus on and that we pursue. So I think volleyball, if you ask Coach Horsman any year how they're going to be, I think he'd tell you he thinks they're going to be pretty good. And that's our expectation. So we'll be excited to get fans back in the Frerick Center too.
Yeah, I'll make this little plug. Outside of men's and women's basketball and football, all of our sporting events are free. So as long as we're full attendance in the fall, please come out and support them at our men's and women's soccer teams at Beaujon. Come to the Frericks, watch them play. It's absolutely incredible for our volleyball team. It's awesome, and they're free. They're awesome family events. I can plug that about 10 more times, but please come out as long as we're good to go. It really is an incredible time, and you're seeing an NCAA caliber teams perform right there. It's truly incredible. So I'll make that plug again probably at the end too, but we'll shift and now look at we had a question come in saying, how can alumni support our student athletes beyond just attending the games?
Yeah, I think in a number of things we do. Obviously, there is the just cold hard reality that it takes it's very expensive to run Division I athletic department, and there is a financial reality to it that is significantly based on a donor support, alumni support, community support, and engagement. So to the extent that people are able to not attend games but can support their favorite program, or find ways to endeavor themselves to have financial contributions. So I don't want to limit everything just to money, because there's a lot more to life than money and being a student athlete. But when you think about their experience, how their ability to travel, their access to healthcare, their ability to quality coaching, and their ability to compete with the Ohio States of the world, money is a very real part of that. I think the other piece that we're trying to focus even more on is having a network of people that they can reach out to and access in their plans for post graduation. We have young men and women here that come here with high hopes, dreams, and aspirations of playing professional sports or doing that. The reality is, for most of them, they're going to enter the workforce. And one thing we want to be able to sell, and to be able to sell authentically, is a network of alums across this country that would do anything for students, let alone student athletes at the University of Dayton, to help them connect, help them get a good career path, and help them do that. So it's really important to us that we're able to, and we're reorganizing some stuff within our athletic department to enhance that opportunity with career services and make it more of a priority, to really say, look, this is a relationship for 30 years. This isn't about a 4-year relationship. Come here, play some games for us, get a little bit of a scholarship, disappear. We want it to be a 30-year relationship and longer, and really for lifetime. So I think, obviously the financial support and the networking support, as we enter the name, image, likeness space, our athletes love to be followed and love to be tracked on their social media. So follow them, and not just the basketball players, but let the women's golfer know that you watched their event, and on social media, and if she posts something on Instagram, and you support that and like that, and let them know that as an alum that you value what they do. I think those are 3 ways beyond attending games that could be impactful.
That's incredible. Shifting gears a little bit back to men's basketball, can you give us any nuggets on the upcoming season schedule? Anything that is set in stone right now?
Not really. I mean, I believe our home opener will be November 9th. Our challenge in basketball scheduling is well documented. We got a little off kilter with COVID on our home and away schedule. So we try to schedule, we schedule one preseason tournament, typically Maui, Bahamas, Orlando, Charleston, that type of thing. And then we want 3 to 4 other games in that non-conference that are against NCAA caliber opponents. So these are teams that are competing for the NCAA tournament that fans want to see, fans want to watch. And then there's typically 5 or 6 games that are what we call one-way games, guarantee games, that sometimes I'll get fans saying, why are we playing, Southern Louisiana, or why are we playing this team? And what we're focused on is those 3 or 4. So we're at SMU, we're at Ole Miss. And so that'll probably take care of our away games, because we got a game at SMU, we're at Ole Miss, and we have 3 games in Orlando. The challenge with the basketball schedule is if I fill dates now, and it's getting late, but it's almost a game of chicken. And I'm speaking pretty candidly, but if we fill certain dates and then XYZ team from the SEC or the ACC says, hey, I'd like to play, actually, in order for them to come to UD Arena and play us, they have to be desperate and they have to be out of time. And so I have to let that clock go as far as it can go to make sure that we're maximizing the chance for them to come here, because they're not coming here in April. They're not coming here in May. And even in June, they're like, eh. And then every now and then we get these games late because there's no one else for them to dance with. And they actually need to come to Dayton. But until they get to that point, it's a very difficult conversation, and effectively the conversation is, I'm not coming to UD Arena to play you basketball. And I would say 9 out of 10 conversations that go. So scheduling has gotten later and later in order for us to have a chance at maximizing what I call a game of scheduling chicken. And there's chances I lose that game too, where we're pushing the envelope, and it doesn't come through. But I can tell you, in my time here, that's how we got Pitt at home. That's how we got, Auburn. That's how we had a lot of these they developed late. So it's a little bit stressful. It's a little bit tenuous to try and get those home games. Unfortunately, last year we had 2 of them in Mississippi and SMU, but we just didn't have any fans. So unfortunately, we have to return those this year, which is a challenge. So I would have loved to have those with fans, because our fans love those games, but COVID had other plans.
Yeah. So we have time for a couple more questions. So I'll fire this one. I think it might actually be piggybacking off the last question. As an athletic director, what have you found to be the most challenging part of the job?
Boy, I think balance is probably the word that I come up with in terms of all the things that the University of Dayton wants to be, which is hyper competitive. We want to be champions. We want to be scholars. We want to be good community ambassadors. We want to have our student athletes have a good student experience. So I often tell people, if we were in 2019, when we were set to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, I believe our fans were proud of the players on that team. They were proud of how they represented. If you think about someone like Obi Toppin and Trey Landers and Ryan Mikesell, and the way they represent the university, that we want that 29-2 team to also have that factor, right? So if we're 29-2, we have people that aren't engaged in the community. They're failing out of school. They're poor students. They're making poor decisions off the court that don't reflect well on us. We're not too thrilled with that. At the same time, if we were, super nice players, men's and women's basketball players, football players, soccer players, and you let them babysit your kids anytime, but they don't win anything. They just can't win. That's not good enough either. So we want academics to be very, very strong, but there is a sacrifice you make academically to be a Division I athlete. you probably do drop a couple GPA points here and there because of your demands as an athlete. And we think that's okay on balance, right? On balance. So we don't want someone to go from a 4.0 to a 1.5, but maybe if someone's got a 3.7 GPA instead of a 3.9, but they were a 4-year starter on the crew team, hey, we think that has an educational value trade-off. So most of our decisions are constantly trying to balance all the different priorities. There's different political priorities. That we have 13,000 fans that come to a game. They all have an opinion that they're not bashful about sharing with me, or finding me or emailing me, whether it's the out of bounds play we ran, the music we play, or the t-shirts that players wore. It's public. It's very public facing. Athletics is very public facing, but I would answer that with I think trying to find the right balance between all we want to be.
Perfect. Neil, I have one final question for you. And this question really just sort of encapsulates, I think, everything over the last year and over your time as athletic director. I'm sure there's plenty of things that you've, over the course of the time, sat there and been up at 2 a.m. or woken up in the middle of the night going, oh gosh, like, how am I going to handle this? What's one thing that makes you sit there and smile a little bit as you're getting ready to go to bed and go, man, this is really incredible. And this is how I know that the University of Dayton and the athletic department is heading the right direction?
Yeah, I would say people and value-based decision making. So when decisions get really hard and get really complicated, the most challenging decisions, if you are made with the values of the institution you serve, we're going from the board of trustees to the president to the faculty, and to our staff, and you do things and you ultimately say, we're going to make what we believe is the right decision for people. It's the right human decision to make. And there might be consequences to it elsewhere, but we're going to make the right human decision for the people that we serve. The decisions become, although still very challenging, become easier. And so I was really proud of the people that I worked with and very proud of the team at the University of Dayton, from the board of trustees to President Spina to Provost Benson, to Jen Howe and development, anyone you could name, that we collectively tried to make decisions that were in the best interest of people. And we weren't perfect. Athletics wasn't perfect. The university wasn't perfect, but we tried to do what's right for everyone involved.
Boom. That's perfect. And that's a wrap. I apologize to anybody if we weren't able to get to your questions. Afterwards, Neil has mentioned he does get emails. So if you have a really burning question, there are ways to contact either him or others in the athletic department to be able to answer it. Like he said, we love being able to talk with you guys, being able to give you guys answers to questions. Neil, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up this session of Alumni Week?
Nope, I'm just appreciative to our alums, our fans, and we expect to deliver for you moving forward. We will do everything we can to get back to what 1920 looked like as fast as possible, and that's what our single sole focus is.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Neil. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. As a reminder, on Wednesday, we have our 3 Presidents, 1 Shared Legacy session. So if you haven't signed up for that already, be sure to sign up for that. There's a calendar with a bunch of other awesome events throughout the course of the week that the alumni group and everybody else have planned. So please take a look at that. Go online, find all of that. If you want to support athletics, you want to do everything there, you can find ways to do that also through Dayton Flyers. Follow us, do everything else like that. Otherwise, have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much, and go Flyers.